Okay, so first of all, liquid lending is a lending and borrowing protocol. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, and so a collateralized loan is something that people can take. They can put up with liquid loans, as an example. They put up Pulse as collateral, and then they borrow against the value of their Pulse in your native coin, which is USDL.
Correct. One of
Okay.
the native. Correct.
Okay, one of the native. Okay. So
Right.
USDL, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the protocol has two tokens to it. One is the USDL stablecoin, and the other one is called the loan token.
Okay.
That loan token has some other functions to it, such as staking, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Okay, cool. So an algorithm. So the reason that USDL is always worth $1 is because it's tied to $1 of Pulse. So it's an algorithmic stablecoin. Okay. Now, historically, there have been a lot of problems with algorithmic stablecoins, and we've seen them this year. Like, that term itself is scary to me. Why shouldn't it be?
Well, what's interesting is May, Ethereum took quite a bit of a dump, and a lot of these algorithmic stablecoins, they didn't hold their value to $1 very well. You saw some of them starting to trade even as low as like 70 to 75 cents. What's interesting is the code that we're using during that same period of time only lost 5% of its value for a short period of time. So it traded for 95 cents for a really brief period of time. There are reasons for that. So for example, there's some algorithmic stablecoins that will require the native token of the project itself to be the collateral. So you're taking a very speculative asset that's also part of the protocol that you're using and saying, here, you have to go buy this. And oh, by the way, that's also the thing that you have to lock up to supply the value for what you're about to mint. That framework has never worked very well. There's also some that use inflation and deflationary protocols inside of the stablecoin to make more of it or burn some of it, just to try and peg the value to $1. And typically that's also broken. There's some that use the fees or the interest rate to try and inflate or appreciate or depreciate the price to keep it pegged to $1. That doesn't work either. And we'll tell you why this protocol does work and how it keeps its value.
Okay. So, another question is, with the Hex audience being like really concerned about products being audited, I asked in your chat about this product being audited, and you said that it's not, but it is forked from something that has been audited. That's correct, right?
It is being audited. We're actually trying to do 2 audits. So the code itself is running on multiple different blockchains. It originated on Ethereum. There's been a number of audits that were done on it. It's called the Liquidity protocol, by the way. That's where it started from.
I was going to ask about that so that people can look at the audits of that product if they're curious while we await your independent audit.
Right. When you fork something, it is open source. So you grab the code and you make it work on the new chain, right? There's a number of things that have to happen. You have to point the Oracle calls to the right places. The PRC settings for the chain, the ticker symbols. There's a bunch of things that have to be modified when you do a fork. You can't just copy and paste and all of a sudden it starts working. But So as such, it makes sense to send it through another audit, just to verify that it's okay.
Right. And I was going to ask about any changes that you have made from the code, from the protocol itself that you forked.
Yep, just to make it work on the PulseChain.
Okay, just to make it work on the Pulse, and that's why independent audits are currently underway, 2 of them.
Correct.
Okay. And I wanted to talk about the lowest collateralization rate being 110%. So if you deposit $110,000 worth of Pulse, you can borrow up to $100,000 in USDL.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So is that is a higher collateralization rate than most protocols, most lending and borrowing protocols, at least the ones that I'm familiar with. So if I lock up $110,000 worth of USDC on Aave, which is different because it's centralized and there's counterparty risk and everything, I can only borrow up to $37,000. So, and that's considered high risk. So let's talk about the risk with borrowing that much of your, if you were to borrow $100,000 on 110,000.
Right. So it's interesting, right? So when you go to exchanges and you want to borrow, you can actually leverage, right? You can put in a little bit and you can get a lot, and that's how you lose all your money. But there's also other protocols where you can put in a lot and they make you put in a lot, and you only get a little. And what that leaves room for is, in the event of some sort of so-called scamwick event, you can still lose all your money. This protocol here only requires the value of what you'd like to extract plus a little bit. Okay. It encourages people to put more collateral, to keep themselves at safer levels. It does that algorithmically as well, shifting the fee structure so that
I've heard you say that there's going to be a health rating on the platform based on how much you have collateralized.
Yeah, kind of. So really, when you back the value of something that you mint, right? So in this case, you're going to mint the USDL. The protocol simply needs that same value to back it. It needs a little bit of, like, so 110%. You have to put in 110% because flash crashes.
Sure.
Right. You don't want to see the price of something go from 110,000 down to 90,000, down to 80,000, and then wow, what's backing the value of that?
Sure.
Now there is a stability pool which covers any liquidations, but you don't want to rely on that. So you need the collateral that's in the vault that you create when you take a loan to have at least the value of what you mint plus a little bit.
Okay.
Now,
yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. I mean, yeah, there are fees for transactions, even though they are going to be minimal on Pulse, right? There's a reason for needing to have more than you borrow. And then that also does minimize someone's tax liability, right? So instead, instead of selling your Pulse, you take a collateralized loan against it. The collateralized loan is not a taxable event.
Yeah, so everyone needs to check with their tax advisor, but loans aren't taxed. You're putting up collateral, and then you're being issued a loan by the protocol, right? That's not taxed.
Right. You'd still be taxed on the gains from if you had gains from when you deposited the funds. Yeah.
Right, or from you received the loan, right? Let's say you received $100,000, and then you go and you start trading on PulseSwap, right? And that $100,000 turns into $200,000. I'm sure you'd be responsible for all those gains. Right.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, certainly flash loans will eventually launch on Pulse because people are going to want to take advantage of arbitrage opportunities. Okay, but that's why safe collateralization levels are really important.
Right.
And 150 is a safe collateralization level. What would you say the risk factor is there?
So the system's looking for 150 minimum. I'd say, in what you see on the other blockchains, you tend to see an average of around 300%. This is worth noting as well. Accounts can get liquidated at more than 110%.
Okay.
Hold on, let me explain though.
Okay.
It sounds scary. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the average collateralization level across all of the open borrowers falls below 150%. The system actually goes into what's called recovery mode, which allows accounts that are over 110% collateralized to be liquidated. Now, that doesn't mean that if somebody has $1 million worth of Pulse in their vault and they took a $2,000 loan, that they're going to lose all their money. That's not how it works. The system will simply start in pecking order from the lowest collateralization level up, and it will take 110% or 109% away in the form of Pulse, distribute it to the stability providers, and it'll close those loans. At no point, at any time, in any situation, in any black swan event, can anybody ever lose more than 110% of what they've already minted and spent how they wanted to. Okay. So even though if the average falls below 150 and other loans are able to be liquidated, it's only 110% of what they've already gotten. Right? They've already spent that money how they wanted to. And even these events would be extremely rare because the average usually sits around 300%.
All right. So ultimately, even though you don't really want it to be used this way, you don't want this to be like a degenerate Deegan tool. Looking at it, I mean, will liquid loans become a leverage platform?
No, the system won't let it. The system will not let it. So the system requires a minimum or an average rather collateralization level of 150% across the board. And if that average across all the open borrowing vaults falls below 150, it actually prevents anybody from coming in at less than 150.
Okay.
Right. So it stops all further actions that would further decline the average collateralization level.
Okay. Okay. So is it possible for someone to use it as a leveraging platform?
I'll kind of answer one of those things that people, and we get this a lot. They were like, well, what if I come in, I collateralize, and I just try and run a loop. So I get USDL, I come back into Pulse, I collateralize, I take in, I get more stable coin and keep doing that over and over and over again in a loop. Mm-hmm. It doesn't hurt the price of Pulse, and in fact, it pumps it. It doesn't hurt the loan protocol at all. The only thing that could be affected is the person doing that, because they end up with a few stable coin, and if the price of Pulse does dip, they would get liquidated and just be holding a few stable coins. So, and that's why we want to educate everyone, and that's why we have the Telegram, is to teach people, to not be a degen, on this type.
So we're going to have educational tools. We're already educating people. Don't use this as a degen tool. Don't do it. Each time you try and run a loop, you are pumping the price of Pulse, and you're being left with more and more debt while you do that. If the price moves against you and you're only holding a few stablecoin, that's all that you're going to be left with at the end of it. And all your Pulse that you did that with will end up in the hands of all the stability providers.
Now, and look, and don't get me wrong. If the price of Pulse goes up, and people want to be aggressive with that type of play, then they'll realize the gains that they were looking to make, right?
Right.
We just don't advise people to do it, to use it in that manner. Like myself, I'm a conservative. I'm going to use it conservatively, over collateralize myself, but in the over collateralization volume of what I'm looking at as a whole, I'm going to be using the protocol as a stability depositor, right, to earn the loan token, earn Pulse, and then also staking. I mean, I'm all about staking. I'm going to stake that loan token and earn USDL, and then use that USDL to pay down my loan. But I'm factoring that over collateralization level into the whole scheme of things. So I look at all the numbers. I'm factoring in how much I want to be a stability depositor, how much I'm going to stake, and factor that in with the loan.